The first piece of equipment I got from Seekers Beyond the Shroud was this. I opened up my mail to find a slim booklet, and it contained this awesome cover illustration. And inside are in effect, it's like a GM screen for this solo RPG. It has some summary of basic information that you need when playing the game. It doesn't actually allow you to play the game without referencing the larger book, but it's pretty useful as a reference. The reason I'm showing it to you first is because this was my first experience of the physical product of this game, and perhaps it will be yours too if you're just watching this video. And it says quite a lot about what this game is. It is deeply thematic, evocative, mysterious, somewhat horror. It's not quite a horror game, I would say. It is, I think, described as urban horror. Here is the actual physical book itself. It's also available as a PDF. This is the second, I don't know if it's called the second edition or the second printing. We will see that when we get to the credits here, which I want to do immediately. It is written and designed by Alex T., who was nice enough to arrange for Black Oath Entertainment and Exalted Funeral to send me a copy. Exalted Funeral is the publisher. It's copyright 2019, Black Oath Entertainment and Exalted Funeral. And here are the credits for the interior, illustration, the cover, character sheet, which I'm going to show you in a minute, the layout, editing, development, and additional editing. And it says you can find a printable version of the character sheet and other resources at blackoathgames.com. And I'll put the link right there and, of course, below in my video description. You can see just opening up right away from the first full page illustration that this is a mysterious, horror-infused, perhaps insanity-infused type of game, and indeed it is. And let me show you, actually, the next thing I'll show you is the character sheet. It's a great character sheet. I was unable to print it out myself because I'm having some lingering issues related to the move that I made recently where I can't quite get my printer to work. So when I've been playing it, I've been using, unfortunately, just this. I have played through parts of this game before. I was sent it as a PDF quite some time ago and played parts of it that way. For me, it was difficult to work with as a PDF for a variety of reasons. So I kind of count my experience with the game right now as the first time playing. This video is not going to demonstrate gameplay per se at all. I'm going to talk about what you get with the game and the different parts of the game. I may show a teeny bit of examples of gameplay, I'm not sure yet. But first I want to direct you to what the back of the book says, and it says, "The world is not what it seems. Behind the busyness of modern life lies a wider, deeper, and frightening truth. Our materialistic way of life, carried on the shoulders of the Industrial Revolution, brought humanity an existence devoid of meaning and essence." And it says further that your character knows something better, knows that there are other things, other forces at work in the world. Seekers Beyond the Shroud is a single-player tabletop RPG immersing the player into a world of occult societies battling for power and magicians performing arcane rituals and sealing pacts with spiritual entities exploring a hidden reality from their underground base in modern-day London. They align themselves with different occult orders and secret societies, learn the mysteries of alchemy and ritual magic, master spells and astral traveling, and ultimately command a host of spirits to take over both the physical and the spiritual worlds. Using a free-form, skill-based character creation system, you create your adept and explore countless locations, from the astral planes to abandoned complex, ruins, and even secret sanctums, all filled with randomly generated events, enemies, and discoveries. With dozens of tables generating your expeditions and missions, you never have the same gameplay experience twice. You operate from a headquarters, and you may arrive at this headquarters or city area, make pact with different entities, gain their power, learn magic, and in a sense, develop and level up your character. And it highlights some of the things that this RPG, this solo RPG offers, including a rich lore and a complex and rich magical system and randomly generated mission systems and some other things. I point out these aspects of it because I think in a way, and here again is the copyright line, so you can see that clearly, as well as the ISBN if you want to order the book that way. I point this out because Secrets Beyond the Shroud is, I think, pretty unique among the solo RPG books that I have experienced in that it falls somewhat in between a very deeply developed lore and long time commitment to place your character within a world and develop your character within a particular setting to gain benefits. And in this case, the benefits are relationships to spirits and the spirit world, including even melding totally with those spirits, to give yourself access to magic and to powers and to ways of manipulating the world. So the magic system involves very detailed and well thought out astrological based ritual casting. So you are immersed in, as it says, timing is everything, a very real feel system of alignments of the moon and the days of the week and what that means in terms of trying to cast your magic, to relate to the spirits, to perform your summoning rituals. All of these things are very rich, very deep, and to actually attain them, to get to a place where you have the requirements, the materials to execute a spell or ritual that would, for example, allow you to empower a weapon, takes a fair amount of commitment. You are doing this by aligning yourselves with various societies that may or may not be present in the town on any given day and fulfilling missions for them. This material comes first in the book, or I shouldn't say first, but comes very close up in the book. Magic, how you cast spells, what the effects of those spells are, but you need to work toward being able to attain these spells. All of this comes before the chapter on playing the game. When you get to the chapter on playing the game, you see some basic information about passing attribute tests or skill tests, and this is perhaps more familiar to those of us who play various forms of RPGs. The attribute tests are a D20, involve a D20, and you are attempting to roll below your stat and be successful if you do so. So we have strength, dexterity, constitution, willpower, intelligence, and charisma. These are fairly traditional stats, and for your character, you're starting them, they all start at 10, and then you have up to 20 points to add on to them. Your skills are a D100 based skill, and you start with 250 points to distribute among these skills, which are divided into both combat and non-combat skills. So again, fairly traditional. You, at every 5 usages of a skill, have an opportunity to make a roll to, it's called the skill up roll, to roll a D100, and if you roll above that value, you can increase your skill by 1%, so you have incremental increases there. It's when you get to the talents and abilities that you see the differentiation of this game, because talents are benefits that are granted by the orders or the secret societies that live in the world, and they will impact your basic attributes. They will give you new skills. They can give you access to various aspects of magic, and you must decide what you are seeking by interacting with particular societies who offer different things. And this is where the lore of the world starts to come into play when we look at the various orders. So under this description of orders, they're magical orders. It says as long as humanity has existed, Groups have organized to work toward common goals, sometimes in competition or opposed, and the occult world is no different. These are orders, sects, and organizations that are more than we could imagine, but there are some in this game. And somewhere in the book it says it says more orders will be described in future releases. So we have a number of different orders here, and when we arrive at the place where they're located, we need to roll to determine randomly who is present that day and whether they will be assigning us, or we could approach them to have them assign us a mission. And you can see in the order description, so we'll just take a look at this order here. This is Causa Scientiae, Latin for the sake of knowledge, is a unique kind of organization. They care not for politics. Their goal is to understand the nature of reality. And then the types of talents that you are granted by fulfilling missions for them are related to that theme of that order. But not all orders are this way. So, for example, here is another order that they oppose creation and are often in conflict with this order, and they are more sort of a combat order. I don't know enough about the existing work and writing on secret societies and Kabbalism and all that, but it seems to me this is very much based in existing literature, and it has the feel of deep research behind it. So your other aspect of this game, the way the game interfaces between the kind of rich, deep lore of the mysticism and the occult that is around in the world just beyond, is through these missions. And the missions themselves are fairly, I don't want to say straightforward, but they can be accomplished in potentially a fairly short amount of time, allowing for a player to interact with this game in, say, you could probably play a little session or part of what is in effect a dungeon crawl in maybe 20 to 30 minutes if you already had a character, and you could also spend many, many hours with your character, trying to develop your character, focusing on a rising within a particular order and gaining favor within a particular order to develop your character in a certain way, spiritually or mystically. The orders themselves, what you do is you have a d20 roll. So you would roll a d20 and you would come up with an overall order. So let's just say we rolled a 2. We would turn to the description here, and it says, this is less official order business and more personal favor, but either way you'll get on their good side if you do what they ask. And there are, as mentioned, favor points and other things that you gain from completing missions that you can then expend in learning skills, learning talents, having access to magic, etc. So what you're doing here is going to a randomly determined site, and in this case it's on page 58. So we would turn to page 58 to roll up a randomly determined site, and this is going to be the overall theme of the site, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, so this takes you to the gameplay location area, and there are 6 kind of general thematic places. So let's say we rolled a 1, we would be in an abandoned complex. And we have a description here of what the complex is, generally speaking. And this is where it's particularly clever, I think, in allowing variability without having a million different random tables. So what you're told here is that there is one main entrance, and then you are given a stat line, and the stat line has to do with the percentage chance that there are enemies, events, or discoveries in that particular place. So there's a 60% chance here that there will be enemies in the main entrance. There's only a 40% chance that an event will happen, and only a 20% chance that you'll discover something there. And of course, there are tables to roll on to see what those things might be. The first number, again, is how many of them there are. So there's one main entrance. In this abandoned complex, there are D10 plus 5 hallways. There's one warehouse. There's 3d6 offices or rooms. and there's 50% chance of having one rec room, and then there's a parking lot. So you build up your environment, your map in that manner based on these particular stats. And then within each section, note the likelihood of these things happening. So as you travel through, you then have an opportunity to determine whether or not, for example, you would find an enemy in the main entrance. And then here's an example of an example of a map that was made with these characteristics on it. For the enemies, you then, if you are going to see an enemy, you figure out if it is a regular enemy or a veteran enemy, that is to say, some enemy that has more experience and therefore is harder to defeat. And you will be rolling on the enemy table to see, in particular, what enemy you would be facing in that particular place. And again, this part of the game may seem somewhat more familiar to those of you who have played other types of solo RPGs where you have a series of random tables that are linked to specifics of a location. And here's an example of some veteran encounters that you may have, veteran enemies that you may have, some benefits that they get because they are veterans, and examples of some stats, which I will go over in a moment. You can also have encounters and combat in the astral plane, and if you are doing that, you do not lose physical life as a result of that. You lose, I think it's called soul points, I can't completely remember right now, that is part of your character creation that you have at the beginning of the game. And here you can see various NPCs that you may encounter and a lot of different aspects of developing a random NPC, including giving it a background, what a sort of impression, a first impression would be, what their motivation is, and overall traits. And these are all keyed to the character sheet that you have, so it provides a really rich but quick way of, if you're told to encounter an NPC, of developing or encountering an NPC that has some variability and some kind of personality, for lack of a better word, I would call it. Before we take a look at the vestiges section that we were just in, I want to go back a little bit to the magic and just give you a little bit more deep look inside the magic system here and the magic philosophy here, because it's a pretty big part of this book. And it says here, this is real magic though, no fireballs or flying here. It is channeling entities from the spirit world and gaining their benefits and gaining the access to magic that they have. As an adept, most of your time is spent preparing and performing rituals to contact otherworldly entities known as spirits. This is an umbrella term that includes vestiges, which are spirits of the deceased, angels, demons, gods, and anything in between. These spirits range from deceased humans to all-powerful, pan-dimensional entities, and their powers, knowledge, and areas of expertise vary accordingly. The method of interacting with each begins the same way, a summoning ritual. These rituals allow you to contact the spirit, negotiate with it, gain its favor, and ideally, its power. The spirits exist in the astral planes, and this is then the beginning of the discussion of how you contact them, as we briefly looked at before. There are different steps to doing that. It says adepts attempt to interact with spirits through summoning rituals for multiple reasons. Essentially, it is to gain these various benefits, and ultimately to fully embrace an entity's power, you need to utilize invocation, which is the act of placing a spirit's essence into you. And this is somewhat probably invoked here in this picture that I showed you at the beginning of the video. So back to the end of the book here, these are some examples of vestiges of deceased people, like a promising magician here, an apprentice of a Viking witch that you could ultimately attempt to invoke into you. And the spirits are listed here as well, with the astrological associations, what the proper ritual is, what the boon is, what the effect that you're getting is for various types of invocation and success with the magic. And as mentioned, this part of the game of the world here is integrated very cleanly with a more mundane part of the game. And as here we have a look at some magic relics, a d20 table of magic relics that you could get. It's integrated very nicely with what is a much more quotidian, say, in the context of doing RPGs, rolling of random rooms and creating what is, in effect, a dungeon crawl situation, be it through an actual dungeon or and some type of abandoned complex or what have you. The reasons for undertaking the missions and for doing those things are to gain favor with the various orders, who will then grant you ultimately access to their magic, or potentially do that if you are successful enough in your attempts. And you can, as it says somewhere in this book that I didn't read you, it's designed in many ways, it's meant to be like sandboxy. You can kind of do what you want or develop your character as you want. You could very effectively play the game simply using the random location generation that I showed you, the random missions, and go through and fight enemies. And I will show you or discuss briefly combat, as I said I would, because I know people are interested in that. There is, in a way, it's a little bit more combat centric than perhaps you might think it would be, because it is also so much about the mysticism and the larger forces and the occult. And there is so much emphasis placed on the rituals, yet the actual progress through the game to get to that point is fairly combat centric. Combat is pretty clean and easy. You do have an initiative roll, and you will have initiative stats for the enemy. And basically what you're doing is you are attacking using your a combat skill that you have. So for example, if you were using a one-handed melee weapon like a pistol here, my stat for this character is a 46. To have an effective attack there, I would need to roll below that stat. And then the damage I did with my pistol is a 2d10 plus 10 damage. There are some modifiers to this. For example, if you're encountering one of those veteran enemies, they will have a defensive additional stat that you need to subtract from your own. So if they had a 10 defense, it would take 10 away from my roll. I would need to then roll under a 36 to be successful. So there are impacts that the enemy can have with you. There are some conditions that can be rested upon you as a result of combat. You can be bleeding, burning, or chilled, and it gives the effects of this. There are also critical success and failure rolls that you need to remember that will grant you a benefit or a detriment if you make that die roll, regardless of whether or not it was a success. And combat continues in that manner until there is an outcome that you are dead or they are dead. Now, I will say there is at the outset, there is an opportunity to leave. You can sneak by combat if you roll a sneaking check, and the enemy is going to have an awareness level, and you are going to have a sneaking level, which I'm not sure where it is on here, and you could sneak away. I don't think, unless I'm reading the rules wrong, that within combat you can attempt to escape. And this has been an issue for me. I have lost 3 characters in the game pretty early on playing the game. It is not forgiving in that regard. And I don't know whether I was playing incorrectly or missed in some way an early character creation, like life potion or something that I could have done to revive my character at a certain point if I was down to 25% of health or whatever. But I have had developed characters and had them die right away. So that's something to note. If that is something that concerns you in a game, you might need to house rule it, unless there is something, again, that I am missing. The action, as it were, takes place at this underground meeting point for the magicians and spirit world that are practicing in the UK. And you begin by going to this town and rolling on the daily event table to see if anything in particular is happening that would impact your time there. And it could give you some options of things like a fellow adept needing help with something, and you could earn some extra money if you help them. Or the stores are having sales, so when you go to buy things, it costs less or it costs more. It is a city, so there's also random encounters, like you could be, pickpocketed, for example, or somebody offers you, he wants to buy something from you quickly, and things of that nature, which make it seem like a kind of lively place. There's D10 amounts of those. We have some gears and services that you can purchase with your money. I wish there were a little bit more of those, frankly. And again, this is where I was missing, unless I missed it, I didn't see like any type of healing potion that you could purchase or anything of that nature. But perhaps I missed it. I don't know. And again, back to the orders and what you can attempt to do and gain favor and achieve, really. The notion of achievement here is very well executed, and I think that the the feeling that this game gives me, and my playthrough and my character, that's sort of my third character now that's still alive, is kind of like working towards something. You you do have a sense, the game really does provide a sense of identification with the character, that it is so, things are so evocative, and the lore is so well developed, and the actions that you're taking to interact with the spirit world are very richly defined, such that the game does give a feeling of wanting to attain something like this, and that the the leveling up that you do, the further into the game, the further into the world that your character travels, you are feeling more a part of the spirit world. And that is amazingly successful, I think. That in many solo RPGs, you feel, or I should say, I feel, leveling up is, well, now my willpower is 17 and now my strength is this. Here, though, there are stats involved, and though as you use your skills, your stats can increase, really, your spending time with your character in the game develops them in relation to the spirit world, in relation to an occult, mystical, hidden world. And that is, I think, ultimately what makes this so successful and really so unique. I think it's unique in a couple of ways. It's unique in that way. It's unique in the sense that the more time you spend with your character, the more you get into the game. The sandbox nature of it, combined with a fairly stringently detailed world, the two things together make it feel as if the more time you spend, the more you're going into the world of this game. That is, I think, unique. It's also unique in that it does combine these two, I don't want to say contradictory, they're complementary in the game, but potentially contradictory types of gameplay. One which does kind of require a longer term investment of time and returning to the game and continuing to play it to gain access to more and more things to do, with a somewhat quick, if you wish, mission, dungeon crawl, creation of a place, going in, fighting some enemies, getting some treasure, getting out. So the combination of those two things is very unique. The I would say that unlike some games that I talk about, where I think you could successfully play the game without really caring too much or delving too much into the lore of the game. And I present many such games where I kind of just mention that in passing because I don't focus on it. I think here, to really experience the game as it is meant to be, you do need to have an interest in and buy into concepts of that part of the world. This is a really unique solo RPG. It's rich, it is evocative, it is thematic, and it is very involving. It is almost meditative in certain ways, in terms of thinking about how you would develop your character and in what ways you would pursue the spirit world with your character. So that is a look inside Seekers Beyond the Shroud from Black Oath Entertainment and Alex T, published by Exalted Funeral and available at Black Oath Games and ExaltedFuneral.com.